Hello, everyone, and welcome back to SSRG Research Stories. Today, I have with me a wonderful scholar, emerging scholar by the name Okolie, who is about to commence his doctoral degree in the United States, but he has been doing research for quite a few years. So recently, they published, and he and some of his colleagues published an article titled "Distinguishing Abuse from Caregiving in Rural Nigeria: Older Adults Perspective." And today, we'll be discussing that article. And if you have not yet subscribed, please try and subscribe and click the like button if you enjoy what we are doing. We want to translate research that are in journal articles to everyday person's understanding, so people can just have access to new knowledge that is coming out. So, Tochukwu, I'm going to start by asking you to introduce yourself a little bit and, tell us a bit more about yourself.
Okay, thank you so much for having me here, Prince. I think you've done a good job by introducing me. My name is Okolie Tochukwu Jonathan. People call me TC. I'm here in the United States. Recently finished my master's program here in the United States. And like you rightly said, I'll be transitioning to a PhD program by fall of this year, August of this year. And that will be University of Connecticut, where I'll be starting a PhD in human development and family sciences. Yeah, and that's
Fantastic.
me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, can you tell me what was the inspiration or the rationale behind conducting this research?
Thank you very much once again. The rationale was pretty much simple. The number of older adults globally is growing. The number of older adults in Nigeria, people who are 60 years and above, the number is also increasing. And the implication of this is that as the number of older adults are increasing, the number of people who are needed to care for them would also increase. And because like Nigeria is predominantly, informal caregivers are the ones who predominantly care for older adults. And so usually abuse would usually happen even when it's not expected or it's not the intention. Abuse of older adults might happen in those caregiving situations. So that was the rationale to kind of understand, first of all, because we know that abuse is prevalent in caregiving, informal caregiving setting. According to some reports, over 20% of older adults are abused in informal caregiving setting by children, their grandchildren, and their relations. So it's important to understand what is even abuse to older adults themselves. So that was what we needed to understand, because the general idea of abuse is like physical abuse, sexual assault, and all whatnot. But we needed to understand what are other grave forms of abuse that we do not know about. So to
Okay,
talk about
so your research is trying to understand how the older adults in rural Nigeria define abuse, especially
exactly.
in receiving care from informal care providers, right?
Exactly. Because, like I said, the predominant form of caregiving is usually by informal caregivers, and so when usually in a relationship there is an expectation of care, and while carrying out that care responsibility, abuse may obtain. But then it's also interesting because some people may not understand those things that go on, those caregiving patterns as abuse. So it was important to even understand what older adults themselves were saying about these caregiving styles.
So, what are the major findings that came out of the research?
There were pretty much interesting findings, one of which, 16 older adults were sampled for this study. So it's a qualitative study. So we needed to understand their opinions about, like I said, abuse that are not typically defined within the general definitions of abuse. So like mandating older adults to eat and take their medicine, restricting older adults' movement, collecting their money or property, and also finally being present when older adults are dressing or undressing. So these were things that we found out. Yeah.
So I'm curious because in our culture, sometimes the same way we treat children is the same way we treat older adults. Like we
Right.
feel like them eating their food is something they must have to do or take their medication. So like
Right.
we find ourselves in situations where we force them to do those things. So are you
Right.
trying to say in your research that these are different forms of abuse that we do not think about as abuse?
Well, it's interesting because participants had varying opinions about it. Some said, in as much as they are doing it for my own good, I don't see it as an abuse. Other people said, if they are forcing me, that's an abuse. But we must remember that regardless of whether the person is a child or an older adult, they still have that agency, they still have that independence to define what they need for themselves. If I do not want to eat, for example, you do not have to force me to eat, and forcing also could entail physical assault or doing things that would victimize them and, all sort of things. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So, what are the implications of these findings? What do we do now that we have uncovered this? What are the solutions?
So just a quick one. I feel like there are so many things we can do because first of all, I think the general definition of abuse is what we use. And I'll give an instance, abuse, for example, financial abuse, for example, would be maybe someone has a bank account and some money was withdrawn from their bank account. But think about older adults in rural Nigeria who may not have been exposed to banks. My grandmother, for example, would keep her money in a wrapper, and tie it in a wrapper. So when you ask those people about abuse, financial abuse, and you use bank as a definition for that, they have not experienced it. But when you bring it down to the cultural reality of what people are going through, then you begin to uncover some forms of abuse that we may not even be aware of. So the implication is that we need to, as researchers, we need to redefine or reorient ourselves as to how we see.
So there should be a cultural context to the definition of abuse.
Exactly. There should be a cultural context, yeah. And also to caregivers also, they need to be educated on appropriate ways to care for their older adults. Most importantly, even when taking medicine is for their own good, they should actually be educated on how to convince them that, you have to take this drug because it is for your own good,
So who is supposed to do this training?
Gerontological social workers can do that, gerontologists can do that, and stakeholders who are within the aging network and aging care.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your amazing research, and I hope we'll have you again soon when you have a new research. And
yeah,
thanks to
hopefully.
everyone for watching.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Have a nice day.